you. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Grief Let's Talk About It podcast. You guys know who it is. This is Tony Mitch. I'm the host of this podcast. And yes, we are your number one podcast to bring you stories around death, down to grief, all the messiness that comes in between, with some amazing people out here doing some amazing things out here, changing people's lives one heartbeat at a time. Now, before we get started, I'd like to say that this is a live stream. So if you have any questions or comments, please put them in the comment section. We'll be sure to answer them as we go. Now, one other thing. I would like to say that this is for educational purposes only. And if this is your first time tuning in, go ahead and hit the subscribe button on the YouTube channel. And that way you'll be notified every time that we drop a new episode. Now, without further ado, I'm going to bring on my next guest, Jessica Jens, to the show. Jessica, how you doing?
Hey, Tony Lynch. I'm grateful.
Yes, I'm excited. We're here today, right?
Yeah.
And, we've had a great conversation. I can't wait to share your story with the audience and everything. Now, before we get started, go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience. Tell people who you are, where you're from, and about the work that you do.
I'm from New Jersey. I'm a writer. And really the main thing I am is a spiritual practitioner. I've devoted over 20 years of my life pretty intensively and focused to spiritual practice.
Nice.
But I live really simply, and on the outside, I just do creative things and taught meditation for a long time, and always interested in transformational work. Been around that.
Yeah, well, that's good work to be in, because life is a transformation, right? Everything that we do in life transforms us into who we are or who we're becoming. For the most part. Now, we'll talk more in depth about that, because I love the work that you do. So let's jump into it. Let's talk about your journey of how you became who you are today.
Okay. I want to start. I did some writing this morning, right after I got out of bed, because your topic of grief is an important one, and I've had a lifelong training in grief, and I recognize it as the other side of joy and the fullness of life. And in my book, I wrote about grief in a much more feminine way than is often told in our culture, that we need to just get over things, transcend it, put it behind us, and not advocating being stuck, being a victim of what's happened. But there's certain things that we just carry. And that what I've learned to do in my walk of grief is to carry. And what came out this morning is grief is like a stone I carry. It's always in my backpack. Sometimes it is so light, I'm not aware of it. The grief is eclipsed by beauty and joy. And sometimes, and at random, it's like an elephant in the pack I'm carrying. And that's just what I've been working with today, is this simple analogy of grief is like a stone, and it can be a tiny stone, and some days it can be really big, and it's learning how to carry it with dignity and know how to get the gold out of it.
Yeah. Okay.
And so yesterday was an elephant day. That's why I think I had to read it this morning. Today's a little lighter.
But honestly, grief is like that from time to time. And I love the fact that you brought it up, that it is like a stone, because most people don't know how to release it, right? And what happens is that throughout the years, throughout time, we add more to it. One of the things that I've throughout this journey, I was on a men's retreat one year, and we had to go around, and we had one of those little string backpacks. We had to pick up all of these little stones. Every time that we thought of something that was weighing us down, we had to pick up a stone and put it in the bag. And after a while, it was probably about a 3-day event. During this 3 days, I tell you, those bags were big, right? They were so big. And at the end of this retreat, you had to take them out and write down what it was. because during this retreat, we had the groups and things like that. So there was a lot of things that we talked about, and as we wrote it down, we had to throw it into the water, and you know, and the ones that was left was the ones that we couldn't identify. So when we got out of the retreat, we had to go in and actually sit down in the men's groups, and begin to really, really dive deeper into what we were feeling. And you're right, when you think about the masculine things that we carry in grief, most men don't know how to talk. But now I say that to say this, because there's a lot of women out there who's never been taught to talk about these things as well. And I put two and two together. Most people stay in survival mode so long that becomes a way of life, right? We carry these things because it keeps us protected. It keeps us from having to let people in, and it helps us keep those walls up. It's like a safety net, right? Yeah. So what are your thoughts on that? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're talking about grief is like an onion. There's layers to it, and so sometimes there's things that are so deep down that we haven't really given it airspace, and we're just carrying it like a load, but not in a way that's nourishing us.
Right.
Because I've been informed a lot and early on by death and loss and suffering and spiritual teachings, and which any real spiritual teaching goes right into talking about death and loss and the inevitability and the acceptance of that as part of life. And and what I meant by feminine approach to grief, it's not even so much about the masculine not grieving, but I feel like there's a real emphasis in our culture on pushing people, even if they've dealt with it to a degree, to move on and transcend and just put it in your rear view mirror. And there's with certain things, I think sometimes that's true. We've integrated and we've moved on. But I also think there's certain heartbreaks in life that shape us. They don't have to victimize us, but they shape us. And it's what I mean by feminine. Like women, we carry things. We have the ability to create, and there's a circular nature to women and how we relate. And it's I have just found like one line I wrote in my book, which is really true for me, that the absence of my mother in my life, starting from maybe even in the womb, the absence of her has been more impactful in shaping me than the presence of my mom. And that's a loss. And there's a lot of grief. And it's part of who I am now, is a girl, now a woman who, for whatever the story is, didn't really have an attachment to my mother. And so the absence of that has shaped me. And I carry that. And so sometimes, even though my mom has been physically dead for a long time, sometimes the grief of that, just comes on, the stone gets heavy, and it's the elephant. It just is, it's not like I haven't processed it. It's not a deep, dark, repressed thing. Let me throw this into title. Stephen Jenkinson, a writer and someone who's worked in the death trade, I love this quote. He says that grief is love that slipped out of you. Grief is love that has slipped out of you. And so the preposition of that is, if we love and we agree to love, and something like your mom. You're just born coming in wanting to love your mom, and moms wanting to love babies, even if there's blockages. That if we agree to love, it means we also have to agree to experience grief and loss.
Yeah.
Because things will change, people will go, betrayals will happen, but it's connected to love. And so for me, I found it's more accurate to talk about carrying grief with dignity and with wisdom of how to, it's like a gold mine, the losses and the things we've gone through, and how to be enriched by it, how to be softened by it, how to be compassionate. If I'm in touch with my wounds and I carry them, I can recognize and be a space for somebody else to deal with their stone. And some stones, I just think there's some stones, they just don't go away. They change. They change weights. They change colors. We change with it. They shape us. And that's accurate for me, to not have some kind of false pressure that there's things we can just get over.
I want to add to that too, because you're absolutely right? And one thing that I did find as I still grow within this grief field, those bigger stones, once you can recognize them, they begin to weather themselves down to like a small, smooth little pebble, right? Now, it does take time to get to that place. It makes it a little bit easier to carry. So you're not constantly carrying it on your back. You can sometimes put it in your pocket and carry it that way as a reminder of what you said before, that love, right? That love.
Yeah.
And here's a harsh truth about life. You can't have one without the other.
Yes.
You can't. If you're going to love, you're going to grieve.
Yes.
They run hand in hand.
Yes.
Right? But it's what you do with it.
Yes.
In that experience, in those moments, that dictate how you carry that stone.
Mm-hmm.
And to have individuals like yourself and so many other people out there to walk with us in those moments, in those darkest moments, will dictate how we begin to look at these things, but how we begin to stop reacting to them and start to respond to them. Right. Now, again, I'm still a student of this thing, so I could.
Me too.
Right? So, but it's an interesting concept. It's a very interesting concept. I've watched a lot of people, and one thing that one guy I've listened to, Simon Sinek, he had said something, and it had dawned on me the way that we approach some people, or how things can go along the wayside because they look like everything else. And he had told of a story of a friend of his, or I sent them a text. Pretty much got upset with him. You didn't answer your phone, and did you send me a text? Did you call me? She went through and he found the text. He goes, "You mean this text that looks like everyone else's?" And she goes, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, and this is something that I've been implementing. You need me." And the concept is that it takes 8 minutes for a person to feel seen, heard, and validated. But how do you know when a person is needing that validation if they're not being honest in what they're sending? Right? It can't look like everything else, because I need to that conversation with you, or even be able to hold. Be back, but yeah, concept, the 8-minute concept, and to get back here, Oh, there she is.
Sorry.
So I was just asking the concept and how many to our day-to-day life. I want to get your thoughts on that.
I don't know if it's my thing or yours, but you cut out a little bit, so I didn't fully get the question. So just the last.
Oh, I was when I was telling the story, I was telling people, if you really need to talk to somebody, what do you think about sending people a text message or a message that don't look like every other text message, so people can get the gist of what you need from us, right? Because I don't think people really know how to express when they need help. They just like to assume that someone knows that they need help, right?
Yeah. I mean, I really do my best not to communicate that much on text because so much is lost in translation, and I'm old school. Like I'll call people on the phone.
Mm-hmm.
I think I think text is hard. And if we can actually let someone hear our voice, and if we're strong enough to outright ask for help, that's the best. But sometimes maybe we can't do that. But if I can at least get in front of somebody or let them hear my voice, that's a starting point.
Yeah.
To maybe give them a little more relatability that I'm needing something. But of course, if we're able to just ask, like, I mean, I have a practice. I just call friends and say, like, I need to just talk and be listened to. Do you have 10 minutes now? I need to just unload. Not like ranting, but just ask them. And then of course that goes with making the circle of our people, which can be a slow process to cultivate, circle of people who are more and more attuned with themselves. The more person is in tune with themselves, they can be attuned with the field and others, and just having more and more empathetic people who pay attention to some degree and have presence and doing their own work so that they can be available. It's like having that ring around you, which might just start with one person or even the earth itself. I had the earth adopt me. The earth is my mother and the sun is my father, and I have spent many a grief session crying and being held and shined upon by mother below and father above.
Yeah, I think that's important too, because a lot of times, like everything that you're saying, everything goes hand in hand with each other, right? When we've lost people, there's a connection that people can have if they're searching for it. And what I mean by that, coming from a place of spirituality, the soul, the body is gone, but the soul is still out, and the energy is still out in the world. And one of the things that I found was, that comforted me was that I was able to connect to that energy again. I was still able to ask questions and get guidance, because when the one thing that I've learned not to depend on people as much, right? And to depend on my own intuition, as well as, what I feel deep down in my soul, right? Because it's it was like a guiding light for me.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you don't know what to do with that pain.
Yeah.
And when you have experienced deep embedded pain, it changes you to your core, right? It takes something, it takes something away from you. And if you're not careful, you may miss what it's trying to give to you, right? Because it's easy to look at things and go, yeah, this is not working. Until you will look at these things and you can get stuck in victim mode, You can really get stuck in victim mode.
Yeah.
And that can be a hard place to be, Jessica. It can be a really hard place to be. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, somehow I've gone a little non-linear, which I tend to do. Mm-hmm. And what's coming up for me to speak about is there's if we're talking about straight up physical death mm-hmm. of loved ones, or I don't know, identity.
Mm-hmm. That's a huge part.
And why my stone was like an elephant yesterday. There was a lot of the particular grief of having lost a lot of people, major core people in my life, but they're still alive. But for whatever reason, they're not in my lives anymore. And there's a lot of hurt and pain in that thing, but in the middle is still the love and the missing of the people. And so I told you I go a little nonlinear. That's okay?
No, you're totally fine. You're totally fine. I think this is fascinating.
So it's like, the standard is missing like these heavyweight people, and I got a string of them that I just gave a lot to and spent a lot of time with and shared myself and just missing them. But then what was coming up for me yesterday as I get closer and closer to myself is feeling the tenderness of missing the people who knew me. Those experiences, when you really have belly laughed with people and you have shared, like the real intimate corners of yourself, and they just know you, that, you've done time together in certain ways that are
very true.
You just don't get that back, those critical times, but that's what I was reflecting on yesterday, the loss of, which is still like a death. And I think anyone who's been divorced, the divorce is a terrible death, and it's in a way harder to grapple with than physical death because the person's still alive. There's a continuation, although there's such a finality. And the other thing too with certain losses is that we're really alone in what we've lost.
Yeah.
Like when my mother died, there was over 200 people at her memorial. So there was the fabric of community to share that loss. But then there's certain other losses where it's like, it's just me, 2 a.m. holding that, me and, thank God,
yeah.
Going through it. But something about that, the loss of people, and it could even be pets, that really knew us and shared history, and they're gone, and they might still be alive, and that that reality, like how to bear that reality, in a way that turns us back to the sweetness of ourselves. If that makes any sense.
It does. And if I want to add to that a little bit, because I started thinking about that through a conversation earlier with someone. And I started thinking about, just like you said, the people that I've met along the way, those who are gone, those handful of people who are still around that I've known for many, many years. And I started being appreciative of the times that I've had with these individuals, the laugh and things like that, because of the simple fact of it was a good time. It was we got to laugh, we got to show memories, Did I grieve them when they left? I did. But there came a place of, at least for me, and I know I don't expect place of understanding that I was only there to walk them to their next destination.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it was easier for me to let them go.
Mm-hmm.
It really was.
Mm-hmm.
And when it happens over and over and over again, you just get used to understanding that sometimes people's journeys are not to be with you long term.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And it's okay. It's okay because whenever somebody leaves me, I always wish them well on their journey. And if I not, and I always say, if I meet you again, I would love to hear all about your life.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't. I used to hold on to it, but now it's gotten to a point to where I don't hold on to it anymore. Right? I get it. It's just a part of life.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as someone like yourself who is very spiritual, there's a deep embedded understanding of that too. Maybe some people may get it, some people may not. I don't know quite sure how it works out. I can only speak from the things that I've learned along the way. And it helps me. Um, it helps me not grieve as hard for them, although I do grieve for them, right? Because they will be missed, but I don't grieve as hard. It's easier for me to let them go because I want to see them do good, right? I want to see them happy, have families, and be successful in this world. Yeah, that's just me, though.
Yeah, I mean, I think two things can be true.
Right? Yes.
I think that can be so, and then the I don't know. I haven't even gone through the whole thing because I think it's just newer to be so more focused on myself because I've been a consummate caregiver, way extended in other people's needs, and I've been pulling it way back in to just take care of myself. And it's so yes, what you're saying of like blessing people, they're on their way, wishing them good health, love, whatever it is, it's yes to that, but it's about the feeling and giving myself permission to feel inside the loss of like really significant people who you just cultivate things over time, and that they know having those people who mirrored something back, who could make you laugh in a certain way, that's and they just have like a heavy weight quality to them, and I've lost a significant amount of those
Okay.
people, and it's like, yeah, I have fresh experiences and I meet new people, but it's also something, when someone knows you for 20 years and you've really been in the trenches, and all the laughter comes to me, and it's I find myself missing the quality of just knowing, being with people who know me, if that makes any sense, and still wishing them well, and still not trying to like recreate, like accepting what is, but it's I don't know.
No, I definitely get that. I get that on such a deeper level. And as you was talking about that, it was reminding me of some of the people that I've met along the way that have that quality, right? That you've been around for so long, right? And they can make you laugh. They can take you on such a journey in life
Mm-hmm.
that life makes sense for those moments, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Giving too much effort, things like that. So, you know, sometimes. But is there such thing as giving too much effort to the right people?
Well,
That's the key to the
that's
question.
I'm in an adjustment of making much more. So let me just make it a little more personal now, because I always like to hear stories.
Right.
Um, but this is a book I wrote, Red Hot Steel, spicy title, Love Behind Bars, and it's it's a memoir, and I write it the way I speak, and it's about my experience being first friends and long-term meditation correspondence with somebody, a man in New York State prison with a 25 to life sentence. And we wrote letters for 4 years. So I've always been a big reader and have had a real love for writing, and this person, unbelievable writer, really blessed writer, hated it but was great at writing, which I think might be tied to incarceration, the hate of it. Um,
Understood that.
yeah, kind of like a forced. And then when my mom died when I was 28, my my response to that, and I had been corresponding with this person, Sonny, and went through his mother's death, and that made it a little more personal between us, where we got out of just only talking about meditation and yoga and spirituality, and we were, his mom died and my mom was sick and dying, and he was someone who I really wanted to write to and get counsel from, and support. And when my mom actually died, I was like, I want to meet you in person, and had my first experience going inside of a prison. And he was in solitary confinement at the time, which is kind of amazing that they let you visit people in solitary confinement. So I went nose, what do they like? I deep.
Cubicles, the little cubicles with the glass windows in it.
Originally, yes, eventually it was that, but originally it was the wire mesh, which is a little more humane, as you could say, there's nothing humane about the whole thing. It's fucking crazy.
It is.
It's completely crazy. And my training is in anthropology, the study of culture. So I went in there as a meditation person, interested in somebody practicing how to find peace in such a hellish environment. And then I was also, just from an anthropological standpoint, what the hell is this? How do people function in a culture like that?
Right.
The underground and underworld. And then I just had this fondness for this human being who I had written so many letters, and long journey. Eventually, I married him, which seemed like a great idea. Hard idea.
Yeah.
Nobody was particularly happy about my choice, but I shared a lot of soul, of depth, and that mattered to me. And so I got married inside of a prison and did the whole prison wife bid life. And Sonny had, he had a 25 to life sentence, and he had a rough early, what do you call that thing? Like your report card. What do you call that
Oh
thing?
yeah.
It was not good in the beginning. He shaped up more after meditation, and then really kind of took on a new path meeting me. And my whole life was all about how can I support and enhance his quality of life, to keep doing spiritual practice, especially. And got a large community of people to come and visit him over time, and pray for his release. So I was on a mission I wanted this man out of prison, and I wanted to experience life as a wife outside of prison. And a lot of blessing, and this is what my story is about. A lot of interesting twists and turns. And I went to India a bunch of times. My spiritual tradition is connected to India, and there's like a divine saint, mother saint there, and she got in on the prayer campaign and a lot of footwork. And he got out, which was a miracle based on all the factors. And yeah, and it was really an answer to very consistent, fervent prayers. And then even before he actually came out, just shit started going down the hill. And it's a long story, and it's in the book. So hopefully, if anyone watches this, they want a good read. It is a good read.
Yeah,
but
you gave me your links to the book too. So if anybody's interested in reading it, because that is too interesting right there. That is crazy that you met someone in prison on a 25 to life.
In solitary confinement.
In solitary confinement, married this individual. He gets out, and everything kind of goes downhill. But you did get the chance. I mean, you fulfilled the dream. You got the chance to experience what it was like to be a wife, right? And it's just crazy because I have another friend. Her and her now husband, or her husband, went through something similar, right? And to hear that these things are possible, it makes me go, how, right? But I find it to be a beautiful thing, because that are possible. Now, I've never experienced marriage or any sort of love like that. Most of mine are just like whatever, and I know how to move on. So I developed so what I've done over a period of time is that I've learned to speak life and love into myself, right? And I told myself, before I allow anyone else to do it, I will be the first to do it to myself, because that's the most important one. And I'm still learning all the rest of it. Don't get me wrong. I have some beautiful, amazing friends around me, right? And we make it a point to speak into one another, instead of just speaking of us, to speak into one another, because that connection with friends, right, is totally necessary. Now, during your course of grief and loss and things like that, I'm going to ask you a two-part question. What was the most challenging thing that you had to learn? And what was the most difficult thing that you had to give up in order to be who you are today?
Well, I think the most challenging thing I've had to learn is really having a compassion and allegiance to myself.
Okay.
And to see things literally, like on my journey of healing, I learned a phrase called empathy regulation.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I am an empath. Like, I'm born that way, very perceptive, very sensitive, and I can go right to, the core of somebody's pain, even if they're acting like a total asshole. I can go right to the underbelly of where that comes from and have understanding and compassion for that driving thing. And that's a blessing. But it also proves to be a curse for my own well-being if I'm not what I do now, I literally had to hear it and then start practicing, regulate, and not just have empathy on all the time, indiscriminately, and to really take care of myself. And if somebody has really hurtful and bad behavior, I have to limit how far I can go to just understand where that comes from their like traumatic childhood, and just say, and not to get vengeful. I don't mean to like be spiteful, vengeful, not that, but just more self-protective and self-caring and self first, which is not, I mean, I was literally groomed to be a caregiver and literally grew up in a way where I didn't know my own feelings and experience because I was around such heavy suffering that I took that on as my own, which is a certain misappropriation. I write about that in my book. You know what I mean? Like I had an identity as this badass advocate, this unstoppable advocate and passionate, I had this passionate love affair and this wild creative man and this hellish history, but we're spiritual practitioners together and we know each other's soul. And, I brought one person after another that would never have gone to a prison and just, open their eyes to this whole huge world. And what I mean, because, I'm a middle-class white person. I know some communities, it's very common to have prison experiences, but I didn't come from that background predominantly. And all the people I brought into that world were getting first exposure to what so many of our people in America are living with and getting crushed by. I mean, talk about grief. The U.S., probably all prison systems, but I can't speak to other systems. I mean, the prison system is just one wrecking ball of grief and loss and not much nurturance.
Right.
Or wisdom going on to help. It's just individuals in there trying to find some kind of sense of the whole tragedy. And so long-winded answer. The hardest thing to learn, and I'm still learning it, is allegiance to myself. Not in a selfish way, like not in a self-absorbed, not that, in a healthy, balanced way.
Right.
Because I gave a lot, and I don't know if it was a great investment. I don't regret it. But there was a lot of fire and burn at the end.
Do you mind if I add to that a little bit? I love the fact that you said that, right? Not knowing whether or not if it's a good investment or not. And when I say this, I'm only speaking from my own perspective, and because I've had a similar experience, right? When it comes down to prison, I've been to prison before, and most of us that were in there, we were just trying to survive because we go from being out and being free to coming into a place where you're treated like a caged animal, and it changes you, right? It changes your mentality. It changes the way you look at it, because you have to be a certain way, right? You have to be a certain way in order to survive,
right?
And and some people don't get the chance to see the parts of us that we were before we went in, right? You get to see the hard version. But what happens over a period of time, Jessica, is that you become conditioned, right? You become conditioned because this is all you know, right? for however long that you're in there. I was in for 5 years. I've probably done total in my life, probably 17 years of my life behind bars. And everywhere, and I've been all over the place. Being someone on the opposite end now and seeing these gentlemen come out, society has changed. The way that they saw society before they went in is not the same as they came out. A lot of things have progressed. A lot of things have, people don't care what I say, but a lot of things have gotten soft, right? The way that we treat each other. We have technology. Most people went in before technology. They come out, there's Facebook.
Huge stressor. Oh my God.
Right. And so, having to navigate that world, and I want to talk about the investment, because I think, and I could be wrong with this, everyone that we encounter and everyone that encounters us, there is an investment, whether we want it to or not, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether if it's just a simple hello.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why I say that is because we don't know what other people are going through. And that simple hello, that simple, smile, or anything like that could be the determining factor of how the rest of the day that person can have, right? It's just that one simple act of kindness that changes everything. You also mentioned something earlier, earlier than that too, where you was talking about the empathy part, being able to turn it off.
Regulate it.
Or regulate it. Okay, the emotional empathy regulation. And I think a lot of people don't understand that neither. That's another part of the journey that I've been on. Figuring out when I need to be empathetic and when not to be. And what I've learned is that you learn to regulate yours. I've learned to turn mine off.
Okay.
Right. And it's like when I'm talking with other men and they're, pouring their heart out, and we're getting down to the nitty gritty of things, I realize that my emotions have no place in it. So I turn them off, and it empties me out to be able to carry what they want to put inside of me. Right. So they're not carrying that burden themselves. I don't mind. Trust me, I don't. Because every transaction I'm able to learn and grow and get better. Not saying it's like that for everyone, but for me, this is just one of the tricks I've learned along the way. But again, I'm still a student of this. Like you said, we're both students of this, and there's so much more to learn in this world. I don't think it's ever going to be one of those things that we're just going to get everything down pat. Right?
No, I don't. I have no interest in experts. Like, I've been so humbled by the fire. I put a fire. It's really funny. There's a fire on my cover.
I see that, yeah.
And I moved to LA. I let go of everything and moved to LA. Unpacked my little amount of stuff, and then 4 days later, I'm like running down the highway because the fire has just erupted, and I could see it outside my window. And I was like, and everyone's laughing. They're like, only you with all your fire. And I burned. Like, a lot of what I do in terms of grief work is rituals, and use the element of fire to just burn things and let go. And, I burned my banker's box of the most beautiful love letters, mine and his. Took me an hour to just burn them all and watch it turn to ash.
Yeah.
And all the Polaroids of those little prison visit pictures you get, burned them. And fire's a big help. So anyway, yes. I don't know.
No, as you was talking about that, talking about the fire, I started smiling because I read something a long time ago when just after my son passed away. And I've always kept this little box with trinkets in it, and pictures and letters that he had wrote to me for Father's Day.
Yeah.
It was like a memorabilia.
Yeah.
And I started thinking, because I got into reading some traditions all across the world. And I remember saying, in order to be truly free or set something free, you have to burn either that letter, that picture, and things like that. And there's a significant, I can't remember what the significant meaning behind it is, but as you were saying it, it reminded me of that. Like,
Yeah.
burning those things is a release into
Yeah, it's
the
an
world.
alchemy too. It's like I burned all
Okay.
those letters and now I have a book, and it was really funny because like I said, Sonny was this incredible writer, and people, I always said that he was going to write the story, his story and our story, and we had a lot of fights about writing, and other people besides me offered to write books with him because he was that good. And God has a sense of humor, because it ended up me
Oh,
writing a book. And I wrote it by hand. I wrote the whole thing by hand and then typed it up into the computer. And it's very much, I mean, I think the opening chapter is talking about this burn of all those letters and letting go. And it was an initiation. It was a rite of passage, because they were my most treasured objects, and I burned them, and I watched them burn, and I watched it turn to ash, and then when it was cool and safe, I gave the ash to the earth, and I was different after that, and I was ready to go to the next thing, and the next thing for me was writing and completing it. It's like I complete things. I was bound and determined to get this man out of prison, and it worked, and I think, and I attribute that to grace, but there has to be also a lot of attention and calling down and making use of grace. And then it was like, all right, I got to get this book out. And I don't have a background in writing other than letters.
Yeah.
And I just learned how to do it one step at a time. And now it's kind of like letting go of this too.
Really?
In a way, yeah, because it's editing it so many times, which is writing is so healing. I think everyone has a book in them. But editing over and over, every time I went through it, I was different. My cells were different. I was different inside the story, and it switched from being my story to a story. I lived it. I'm informed by it. And what I mean by investment is I poured in 14 years of dedication. I mean, I got a hip injury from driving so much, because they don't put the prisons closed, thousands of dollars for a phone bill. I really wish, a vision for a long life. And I was met with a whole series of reality checks after the grace was given. And this is what I mean by empathy regulation. And I feel like I did a really good job in the book. And it was important to me to talk about incarceration and what it does to people and what it does to their loved ones, and what it does to the younger generation coming up into that. And I have continual compassion and I think some insight into that world from my experience. I always knew that if you love somebody who's incarcerated, you don't ever I guess this is the case for anyone, but it's so extreme in this scenario. Like, no matter how many stories I heard, how much I've read, how much I feel into it, it's like I also knew that I had no idea what it was like to do 26 years, 10 years solitary confinement, to live. It's like I could only know my experience. But I also, gave myself my ex also didn't know what it was like to do what I had to do to be in his life. And so the book is just from one person's perspective, but an intimate look at incarceration and loving somebody in that field, and understanding like how, like you said, it conditions people. There's a lot of generational hurt that comes through a system like that, and so having empathy and understanding and insight into that, and then also, and this has been the edge where the wise elders in my life who have helped me, also having that new muscle of developing empathy too. Like at a certain point, it's like it's not just a get out of jail card. You could do whatever the hell you want. Right. And just blame everything on incarceration. No, we also make choices.
It's very true.
And we have options, and that's been the hard, like really being an advocate for myself, and not just like, oh, but incarceration, yes, like the not having idiot compassion, they say in Buddhism. Idiot compassion is like when you've gone too far and you're allowing things, you're misappropriating energy. From a karmic standpoint, I don't regret a thing, because I had to complete something. I think there's certain people in our lives, when we meet them, especially if you meet somebody in solitary confinement through writing, I mean, we had a karmic, very strong connection. And I knew him, he knew me. And that's one of the things that I miss, there was something, and I completed something through the journey, the whole thing, the whole walk, the burn, the writing, and, he's still in my circle of prayer. So I completed it. But now, being more sober and not so like rosy, I wouldn't make that investment again, because I want more mutual, and I want to be taken care of, and not just overextended because somebody had a traumatic ass childhood and I could relate in the ways that I could relate. It's like growing past that.
Right. I can relate to what you just said, because I've had those different types of relationships with people. And what I found was that they both walk similar paths, right? That's why I'm very accepting of the journeys that people are on, because I've met some amazing people along the way. But I may just have a different way of looking at life. I always tell people, I was telling somebody earlier, we're just walking each other home, right? Some of us just walking each other to our own next destination. And it's okay, right? Because people are on different journeys. You're not meant to be with people forever. And so it helps me accept the fact of that they're going to go off and they're going to do some amazing things in the world. They're going to have families. They may even get married, and, all of these different things. But there's a sense of, there's a deep sense of gratitude for that with them, because it excites me to see who they're going to become if I see them again. And if not, it's just like how you were saying before. It's like the fire. I can take that memory, I can burn it up and release it. It doesn't get easier over time because I have no expectations.
Freedom.
Yeah, I think that's the hardest part of people, right? Especially in life, it's easy for people to put expectations on life But it's harder when you don't meet those expectations because it gives you something to blame in life. And I said, no, life is honest. It's not fair or unfair, right?
That's a good one. Yeah, life is
It's
hard.
not truthful or false. Life just says, I am what I am. You get to choose how you want to live it. So if you choose to live it in a very simple way and say, I get it, life makes more sense, right? The comings and goings of people in and out of life, it really just makes sense to me. And so I'm able to view life in a different way. And I've only met a few people that do that. And I always find it interesting the way the knowledge and wisdom that comes along with that as well, because there's a deeper sense of consciousness that comes along with that, and how it operates within we as human beings.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense.
Yeah,
Hopefully
it makes sense.
hopefully, yeah, hopefully that makes sense. So
Mhm.
I got a couple more questions for you before we begin to wrap this up. I know you probably got a busy day and everything. And I'm
I
enjoying
don't
this
do
conversation.
busy. I do slow speed.
You do
There's
slow
enough
speed?
people being busy and self-important. After this, I'll make my tea. I have a little dog here that wants to play roly-poly.
I know I can hear them, and I think that's the coolest thing ever. You know, the
Yes,
dog's
yeah.
like, "Hey, I know you're up there, right? You know, but I want to play. I want to play, and everything else. You know, and
That's
I
a
think that's
sweetheart.
beautiful. Oh, look at you! Hi, buddy.
That's Rosie.
Hi. Yeah,
That's
how you
Rosie, girl.
doing?
You're on camera.
Yes, you are. Oh, so cute. Oh, so cute.
You're a
And I can
sweetheart.
understand why they want to play roly poly, and why yours is like I gotta play. I can definitely understand that, because if I
Yeah.
had one, I'd be doing the same thing. Okay. So just a couple more questions for you. First one is, how can people find you, and how can people find your book?
My book is on Amazon. They want a signed copy, they could just email me and we could have a correspondence. So I don't know if you can just put my email. I have a website too. I don't do anything with it, but my website is my name, Jessica Jens, 2Ns, S.com. Yeah, those are the email, website, or Amazon if they want the book. It's a good read, and there's a lot of details in there.
I can only imagine. We didn't scratch the surface on a lot of that stuff.
No, not really.
You
There's a
know,
lot to it.
I want people to go to the book and actually, read the book and get everything that you were putting out there and get the full gist of it, right? To get the full experience of it. So my second question would be, if Jessica had a superpower, what would it be?
If I had a superpower, I mean, this is a strange one, but I really accept and informed by the naturalness of death, and that shapes how I walk through life. Not nihilistic, not but I have a real deep relationship to death, which feels like an advantage because I know how to prioritize life and not be bogged down with fear of loss. I'm really, I think that gives me a lot of courage
It does.
and realness.
It does.
And to see, it's like if you really have a relationship to death, you can see deeply through situations.
It's funny that you said that, because I was telling somebody, said, one of my goals in life, two of my goals in life, as I begin to get older and work my way back home, my first goal is that I've always wanted to be God's friend. Not just saying I wanted to always be his friend. I wanted to always learn from him, and
Be God's friend? Is that what
be
you
God's
said?
friend. Yeah, I just wanted to be God's friend.
Beautiful.
Now, on the other side of that, so it sounds kind of strange, but I also wanted to be death's friend.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And those are my two things right there. You know, I wanted to
Interesting.
be God's friend. And I wanted to be death's friend. One, I wanted God to know that He can depend on me to do what He's called me to do, right? That no matter if He calls on me, I'm always going to be here, and things like that. Something that some
Mm-hmm.
people never given to me. More people than not, it's never given to me. So I wanted to be that for someone else because it's easy for us to call on God, but have we ever really been there for Him? Right? When God's going through the toughest times in His life, when He's watching the world and things like
Yeah.
that. Has anybody ever been there for Him? And I wanted to do that. I want to be that for God. But then I looked at death and I said, I wanted to share some stories with death when death comes to take me home, to remind death that I remember when we were friends. Because death will never know love. It'll never know sorrow. It'll never know grief. It'll never know loss. But it gets to watch us in the crevices of life, to see us grow up to be who we are. What would happen if you became friends with death? You know, to share deeper stories with death of saying, this is what it felt like. So death can use its imagination of what that feels like, right? And just maybe it'll make our journey that much better, right? And so those were the things I was thinking about. So yeah,
Cool.
I thought that was pretty cool. I thought that was
Yeah.
pretty cool. I was thinking about it. I was like, I want to be God's friend, and I also want to be death's friend because I
Yeah.
know what grief feels like, right? And then I realized that it's going to take some work, but I'm here to do it. You know, I'm here to experience it. So
Beautiful.
my last thing I would like to ask Jessica, if Jessica can leave the audience with something, what would Jessica leave them?
Mercy. You know, the grace of grief and loss and deep disappointments is, if we trust the process and we go through it, God, however we perceive that, is right there, closer than white on rice.
Yeah.
And it's the pain of loss is the door to mercy. And I don't think there's anything sweeter in this world than God's mercy.
I love that. I love that. I love that. And with that being said, we're going to close out this episode of the Grief Let's Talk About It podcast. I would love to have you back on, Jessica, whenever you want to. Talk about anything that you want to. I think it'd just be a great, awesome conversation, very educational, and helping the audience out and understanding a lot more how we can show up in this world with not just ourselves, but with other people who are experiencing extreme or deep grief, loss, maybe even struggling with their faith, right? Maybe they can grab onto something that we have too to help build them up and give them the strength to take another step and breathe another day.
Yeah.
And for everyone else who have been tuning in, do me a favor. If you have not already, head on over to the YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification so you'll be notified every time that we drop a new episode. And most importantly, maybe these conversations aren't for you just yet, but maybe you know somebody who can benefit from them. Do me a favor, share this along with them. I appreciate you guys. Jessica, again, thank you for being on the show. I am Tony Lynch, I'm the host of this show. As you guys know, we do a show every day. So with that being said, guys, get out there, enjoy the weather, make memories with the people that you have, because you never know when it's going to be the last time that you have them. And most importantly, I'm going to see you guys in the next one. So have a great, amazing day. And yeah, love you.
Thank you, Tony.
You're welcome.